Welcome to Figma Masterclass. In this tutorial, we will learn how to design YouTube's homepage entirely from scratch. The layout you may be really familiar with, since we are on YouTube, but you might have never analyzed it piece by piece. We'll go from basics to more advanced Figma features, from intro to Figma and exploring key capabilities and tools, up to using auto layout, components, and styles. We have a lot to go through, so let's get started. First, let's take a moment to analyze the YouTube's homepage. So this is a screenshot that I took and I placed it directly in Figma, and it is very useful when you're copying interfaces to just have the screenshot directly in the program so you don't have to go back and forth and you can measure things. When it comes to the interface, here we have four major areas. The first one is the top bar, where we see the search bar, the YouTube's logo and avatar and some icons. Then on the left, there is a left navigation with some tabs and icons as well. Below the search bar, we can see the filters, so the buttons where we can filter the content with. And the main part of the interface is the grid with videos, and every video has its own thumbnail, the thumbnail of the channel, the name of the video, the name of the channel, and some details below that. In the description, you can find a link to the exact file that I'm using in this video, so you can follow along and take all the steps with me. And that's it when it comes to the YouTube's homepage. Now let's focus on Figma itself. I'll bring back the panels by pressing Command period. And by the way, every single time I use a keyboard shortcut, you can see it directly at the bottom of the screen. So Command period is for bringing back and hiding the panels. I'll go to intro page where we have no content. And now let's go through all the panels that we see here to analyze them one by one. Starting with the top panel from the left, we have a general Figma menu, the tool for navigating, so the move tool or scale tool. The move tool, you'll be using it majority of the time to just go around the canvas. Then we have the frame, selection, and slice. Frame is, for example, for drawing frames like this. We'll get back to what frames are and how to use them later in the video. Next, there is a menu for different shapes like rectangle, line, arrow, etc. So for example, let's draw a rectangle by selecting the tool and just dragging it on the canvas. You can see that the shape appears here. Next, there is pen tool and pencil tool, and those are for drawing different paths. So for example, with the pen tool, we can draw a vector path. Right next to it, there is text tool. We can click on the canvas and start writing something. Right next to the text tool, we have the resources menu with components, plugins, and widgets. And the next tool that I would like to show you is the hand tool. It allows you to drag the canvas around. And to show you how it works, I need to draw a rectangle so that you can see the canvas is moving. I select the hand tool and I drag the canvas around. Also, if you would like to access this tool temporarily, for example, when using the move tool, you can press and hold spacebar, and as you can see, the icon changes to the hand tool, and you can move the canvas around. And as soon as you let go of spacebar, you come back to the regular move tool. And the last one from this toolbar is add comment. You can click on it, click on the space where you want to pin your comment, and add comment. Press enter or send it via this little arrow submit. And as you can see on the right, we have the panel of comments, and we can click on the comment and see the whole thread that is going on. Let's come back to the regular move tool by pressing V on our keyboard. This is a shortcut for move tool. In the center here, in the top bar, you can see the name of the file and the location, and a little menu with other options. On the right, we have the share options, the developer mode, playing, the prototype, and the zoom that we can select from the menu. And speaking of zoom, of course, you can use your touchpad or your mouse to zoom in and out in Figma. Now let's move on to the left panel. We have the layers and the assets tab. When it comes to the assets, we can come back to it later on. This is where you will be looking for different components and assets from the libraries. But let's focus mainly on the layers tab right now. In Figma, we have the concept of pages and concept of layers. When it comes to pages, you can say that those are separate canvases. So we had our YouTube page where we had our YouTube screenshot. And right now we are on the intro page where we're just exploring different shapes and functionalities. And when it comes to layers, those are in the panel a little bit below. Here you can find everything that is on a given page, on a given canvas. So as you can see, we have our rectangle. If I were to draw another rectangle, for example, it would also appear on the layers panel. Let's quickly change the color of this rectangle so I can show you how the layers work. So right now, the rectangle number 2 is above the gray rectangle. So if I were to move it around like this, it would cover the gray rectangle. If we want to change the order of the layers, we can also do it here by clicking on the layer, holding, and moving it up. And right now, you can see that the red rectangle is below the gray rectangle. If we were to, for example, select both of them, press Command G for grouping, we could create a group, then open it using this little triangle icon and see our rectangles inside of it. We'll come back to grouping and frames later in this video. Of course, for every layer, you can also right-click and see additional options. And when it comes to pages, you can add new page using this plus button. And you can also hide and show the pages if you would like to save some space in the left panel. Now let's move on to the right panel. As you can see here, we have two tabs, Design and Prototype. Prototype is about prototyping. We will not be covering that in this video. So let's focus on the Design tab. If no element is selected on the canvas, we can see the settings that apply to the whole document. So for example, we can change the color of the canvas to basically anything that we want. We can change the opacity or hide the color entirely. Below that, we can see local variables. Those are outside of scope of this video. Local styles that we will be working on later on, and ability to export. If we were to select an element, so for example, our rectangle number 1, the panel on the right changes, and it displays options that are connected to the selected element. So going from the top, we see different alignment options. And let me bring the red rectangle above the bigger rectangle so that you can see how it works. So if we were to select those two rectangles, we can align them to the left, to the center, to the right, or to the top, to the center, and to the bottom. And there are other more advanced options like distributing vertical and horizontal spacing here as well. Let's select the gray rectangle again and talk about the panel that we see here. This is a panel about position and the size of the element and some properties. So when it comes to the position, the x-axis is the horizontal axis. So if we were to move it around like this, and when it comes to the y-axis is the vertical axis. Another row is width and height. So if we were to change the width and the height of the element, we can also log the proportion between the two dimensions. So if we were to change the height, the width will change proportionally. There is the rotation angle and there is the corner radius. So for example, 30, we can now see that the corners are rounded. Below that, we have the setting regarding the opacity of the layer, the fill, so we can change the color and the opacity of the fill and add new fills. Border that appears around the rectangle, as you can see here in the blue one. We can also add some effects like drop shadows, and we can export this rectangle. So for example, if we want to go with a PNG, JPEG, SVG, or PDF, those are the export options. Before we move on to designing our YouTube interface, let me share with you some shortcuts and movements that will make it easier for you to navigate through Figma. If you want to select something in Figma, you need to hover over it and you will see this blue frame around it. And click on it, and now it is selected. You can potentially resize it and edit it. Right now we have the group selected, but if you would like to select elements within this group, so for example this red rectangle, you can either select it from the Layers panel or double click on the group and select the element within the group. Or if you would like to move them along the x-axis or along the y-axis, you can press and hold Shift and then move the elements. Another thing that you can do while holding Shift is resize element uniformly. So if you hold Shift and you try to resize the document, the proportions will be the same. If you were to not hold Shift, you can just resize it in any proportions you would like to. If in addition to Shift, you will also hold the Option key or Alt key, you can resize it uniformly from the center. So the center of the element will stay in the same position. If I were to release the Alt, it will just resize uniformly. Of course, we also have a couple of standard shortcuts, like for example, copy and paste. So Command C and Command V, and it pasted the element exactly in place. We can also use Command Z to undo and Command Shift C to redo. If you want to deselect the element, you can click out of it or you can press Escape. I think it's enough introduction for now. Let's go to our YouTube tab and start working on the actual design. The first thing that I would like us to do is to define some colors, the text styles, and some of the components that we see here in the mockup so that it's easier for us later on to progress with the design. And to do it, let's put together two frames. So let's take the frame tool and just let's drag and draw the frames. The first one will be for colors and text. We can rename the frame here directly in the Layers panel. And the second frame will be for our components. And I think that right now it will be a great moment to tell you about the frames and what is the difference between frames and groups. So for example, if you were to paste the YouTube logo here that I took from their guidelines, and I will link them in the description, you can see that we have a frame and 2 groups within this frame. And if we were to remove this frame, so ungroup them, we can scale them and they will scale proportionally. So if we were to only use this element, for example, it has 2 vector elements within it. If we have a group, they will just scale proportionally. Let's press Command-C a couple of times to just get back to the regular state of the YouTube logo because we will need it later on. Frames, on the other hand, give us a little bit more flexibility. They are more powerful, but they also come with more functionality that I would like to show you right now. So let's draw 2 shapes that we will be working with. One circle, let's say dark blue, and the other circle in a different color, let's say pink. And we have those 2 elements, they have their own dimensions. If we were to select both of them and either right click and select frame selection or press Option Command G to do the same thing. Right now we've created the frame, and if we were to resize the frame, as you can see, the elements within the frame are not resizing by default. Of course we can change that, but by default the frame works like this. We can also change the scaling behavior of the elements that are within the frame. So as you can see here, on the right-hand side, we have the constraints panel. And we see those little icons here. You can adjust where a given element will be pinned. So by default, it's to the left and top border. If we were to, for example, change it to center and center, vertically and horizontally, observe the behavior change between the blue and the pink ellipses. Another interesting thing that we can do with frames, what we cannot do with groups, is to clip content. So if I check this check mark here and change the size of my frame, right now you can see that the parts of both dots that are outside of the frame are cut out. It is really useful for creating elements like carousels and for prototyping later on. So it's a really important functionality to remember. And let's undo all of those changes and come back to default. So I'll change the constraint as well. For the frames, we can also apply auto layout. We can do it for both groups and for the frames. If we apply auto layout, it will be easier for us to space elements within the frame. So let's take a look at the elements that we have in the panel here. We have the direction, so vertical, horizontal, or wrapping, where we define the maximum width and then elements would wrap vertically, for example. Let's say that we want to stay with vertical. Then we define the space between the elements, so we can make it smaller and bigger. So this is how much space will be between our circles. We can also define the padding, both vertical and horizontal. It means how much space there is between the edge of the frame and the elements. So as you can see here, we're adding, for example, 30 pixels. So those are 2 lines here. This is the padding on the left and on the right. And we can also do it for the vertical padding. And if we were to add fill to our frame, now you can see that there is definitely more background that comes from the frame and the padding that is around our elements. We will be working with auto layout a little bit more in the later part of this video. Just one more thing that I would like to mention about the frames. A unique characteristic of them is that we can add grid to frames. So let's say that I've added the frame of our iPhone 14 and I would like to add grid layout. So by default, we have a simple grid, but we can definitely change it to columns, for example. So a little bit more standard grid in design. Change count to 4, let's say, and change margin to 15. And now it will be easier for us to space out elements on this mobile application mockup with the columns that we've defined. That's enough about frames. Now let's come back to our definition of colors and text. We would like to add some rectangles that will serve us as swatches for the colors that we want to use in our design. You can drag to copy them and then select the whole thing and potentially use spacing and distribute horizontal spacing to distribute them equally. Let's use our design to sample the colors. I will use the eyedropper or color picker tool. So it works like this, that you need to activate this icon and then you hover over the area that you want to sample color from, let's say our background color, and it will be applied to the element that you've selected. And since we're already here, let's take a look at the color tool in Figma. We have 2 tabs here, custom and libraries, and we don't have any assets in the libraries yet, so let's focus on the custom. Here we have the solid color. We can also use some gradients, images, etc. Then below that, we can select the color manually. We can change the hue or the saturation here using sliders. And most of the time, you will not be using the sliders. From my experience, you'll be using the value of the color. So for example, the hex code of the color. It is an expression of the color that uses 6 characters. And then you will define the opacity here to have an exact number. Of course, in the menu on the left, you can change the format of the color, for example, to RGB or HSL. But the most popular one is hex. And below that, we have some document colors. Those are defined based on the items that we already have on the canvas. It is a potential place to come back to the colors that you're using, but it's better to create color styles for consistency. So let's resample the background color again. Let's select another rectangle and try to sample this color of the buttons. Another one would probably be the text color, so the main text color. We can zoom in to actually sample the color well. Then we have another text color for the secondary text. It's a little bit more gray. And I think we need one more rectangle for the icons that we see on the screen. So it will be white. I've noticed that there is also a border around the search bar, and it will be another color as well. I think there's one more thing worth mentioning about the hex codes. Of course, you will never be memorizing the hex codes of any colors, but there are two exceptions. I think that it's worth memorizing that FFFFFF is white and all the zeros is black. It will make it easy for you to get to those colors if needed. So let's come back to our color that we sampled, and let's move on to creating the color styles from the colors that we've sampled. So the first one was the background color. You need to go to the style button and then click on plus to create a new color style. And this one would be background. Then we click create style, and the style now is created and it will be available to choose from the color menu. As you can see, we've deselected everything, and now under local styles, in color styles, we have the background color. Of course, if you want to edit that color, we need to hover over it, the edit style icon will appear, and we can change the value in the properties part. So let's do the same thing for the secondary background. For our primary text, here I used the / so that when we go to text secondary, there will be two styles that are grouped together under text label. And then text secondary, create style. And when we take a look at all the color styles, we have the text group, so with primary and secondary, and the backgrounds are separate. So we can go with background primary, and then background secondary. Just need to add the slash, and we have two groups, background and text. The white color that we have here, let's add a simple stroke to it. Maybe let's lower the opacity to like 30. And when it comes to the fill color, we can also save it as the icon color, create style, and the last one would be the border color, create style. And we're done. Now that we're ready with colors, we can move on to text styles. And when you're copying interfaces, you can do it in two ways. First, you can open your browser and use the inspector tool to see what fonts are being used. Or we can simply align it with the screenshot, because here we know the typeface is Roboto, because YouTube is using the material design system that you can find online. And we can simply align the sizes and the weight of the font based on the screenshot that we see here. So let's grab our type tool by pressing T. And we can start typing one of the titles. Let's change the color to white and font to Roboto. Now let's put it closer to our title. We definitely need to increase, I think around 16, but we see that the width, it's not there yet. So it would go with semi-bold. And more or less it is aligned. So this will be our title. Since we're around the video area, let's drag holding Option and Shift just to copy the text. And let's try to align it with the secondary text. I think it will be smaller, so definitely around 14. And it seems like it's going to be medium instead of being semi-bold. That seems to be fairly close as well. So we have our title and our subtitle. Now let's move on to the button. Let's bring it a little bit closer. It seems to be more or less the same. Maybe the semi-bold variant would be better. And another font style that we need is around the left navigation. So here we have a significantly smaller text. I bet it will be around 11, maybe even 10 pixels, and definitely a little bit slimmer. So let's go with medium. And there is one last one, the search placeholder text. This one is definitely bigger, so around 16, and just a regular body font, so regular. I think it's more or less here. Now let's copy all of them and move them to our frame with styles. I'll change the color so that we see them. And this one was the video title. This one was the button. Search would be just a placeholder. Then we have navigation link and the subtitle. Now the whole group is a little bit messy. Let's select all of them by dragging and try to distribute vertical spacing and align them to the left. And I would like to space them out a little bit more, and you can do it here in the panel on the right. Now it's 17 pixels. Let's go up to 30, let's say. And from here, we're ready to create our styles. We need to select the text, and in the right corner, there is a style icon with text styles. And analogically to what we did for colors, we need to click on the plus button to create a style. Let's name it title and create style. And if I deselect everything, now you can see the title appears in local styles under text styles. And we will do the same for subtitle, for our button style, for placeholder, and for navigation link. It's important to notice that text styles do not include text colors. It means that the title could have a text style title and any color we want. We need to apply title style and color style separately. So if we were to apply to this one, we would go with text primary, and it would be white-ish, this off-white color. Another thing to mention here is that in the text styles, analogically to the color styles, you can edit style in the panel here. So if we were to click on edit style, and let's say that we want line height to be 160%, we can definitely do it. Or if we were to put the pixel value, that's also possible. You've probably noticed that I've changed percentages to pixels, and I need to type in the percentage mark to apply the percentage. Or if I want to go back to pixels, I need to do the px and remove the percentage mark. And if we were to close it and look at the title right now, we have 16, which is font size, and 24, which is line height. And let's do the same thing for subtitle. So here, let's put, for example, 20. For button, let's do 20 as well. For placeholder, let's do 24. And for navigation link, I'll go with 14. And now we're ready with our text styles. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, you can give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos about product design, portfolio, and Figma tutorials. Now let's use the color styles and text styles to create some of the UI elements. And the filter buttons seem to be a really good place to start. So when thinking about buttons like this, your first instinct probably would be to start with drawing a rectangle, maybe changing the border radius to, let's say, 5, adding the color that we have in our styles, then use the button text and change the color to text, then put it on top of our rectangle and maybe group it. That would be a very simplistic way to create a button. It looks like a button, it looks correct, but it doesn't have functionality that we need. Meaning, if we were to change the text inside of it, the background wouldn't resize and we would need to work with it manually and align it every single time. And it's not enough flexibility for us in the long term when working on design, and we need a better way to do it, and there is a better way to do it. And this better way is based on frames and auto layout, and it's more similar to how developers actually work with the code to create buttons like this in the websites or in the applications. So let's start with copying our text. We can barely see it right now, but bear with me. We need to create a frame that includes this text. We can do it by right-clicking, frame selection. And now we have a frame, frame 2. Let's call it button. And if you click on this little triangle, you can see that there is a text inside of it. And our button needs to have a background. So let's go with our secondary background. You can see that the height and the width of the frame are very much conditioned right now on the width and the height of the text. And what we want to do is to apply auto layout, so that we are able to create padding, both horizontal and vertical. For now, let's go with 12 horizontal and let's say 8 or maybe 4 vertical. In addition to that, let's go with 5 pixel radius. And as you can see, it's very comparable to what we've created before. But if we were to change it, the button would adjust to the new text, so we don't have to edit the background every single time. Auto layout also allows us to define the space between elements that are within the frame. So for example, if we were to draw an ellipse, that is, let's say, 6 pixels height and width, and let's change it to just simple white color, and we can Command X, cut it, and Command V, paste it within the frame. Right now you can see that the elements are distributed vertically, and there is spacing between them that is conditioned by those 10 pixels that we have here. With the buttons, we would probably want horizontal layout, and slightly less spacing so that this indicator would be closer to the text. And you can use this kind of indicator, for example, when there is some new information. It's a very common use case. We will not be using it for YouTube design, but I just wanted to show you in addition to our regular YouTube design. So let's remove it. One more thing left to do is to copy this button and bring it closer to our screenshot. And let's compare if proportions of our buttons are the same or if we need to change something. So as you can see here, there's a slight difference in height. So let's increase our vertical padding slightly to 6. Also border radius, it seems like our shape is a little too sharp. So let's maybe go with 8. And let's change the text inside our button to compare the width of our UI elements. It seems like it's the same, so we got the horizontal spacing right. In this long row of buttons, you can see that we have 2 states of the button. First is default, and the one on the left, the white one, is selected, so active. Let's copy the button that we have here, put all, and try to style it similarly to what we have in YouTube. So the background here would be from outside of our library of backgrounds because we only have primary and secondary background and they are both dark backgrounds. We need to detach style here so that we are able to sample the color of our active button and create a new style, which would be background, secondary, and active. And we need to create the style. And in our styles, we can see the group background. We have primary, secondary, and secondary active. And we want both secondary colors to be in the same group, so I can drag the previous secondary that we have, and I need to edit its name to default, so that now we have 2 secondary background options. And we need to do the same for text, so we need to detach text primary, sample the color from all, and create a new style that will be analogical, text, secondary, active. And click Create Style. And if we were to take a look at our color styles under text, we have primary, secondary, and secondary active. Again, we need to move the previously created secondary color and name it as default, so that effectively we have text secondary default and text secondary active, so that we have variants that we need for all the buttons. And you can check all the colors that we used in our button here in the selection colors section. So this section appears when you have a group of elements or multiple elements, and all the colors will be listed under the selection color category. And we have background secondary active and text secondary active, so everything is correct. Let's move those 2 buttons to our components section, and I will show you how to create components. Hi, it's Editing Me. I wanted to clarify one thing regarding the backgrounds that we used. As you notice, we went with background primary and then secondary for the buttons. We might as well name it button and then default and active. But in the case of YouTube, I've decided to go with the background secondary because it has multiple uses across the website. So for example, if you were to open this menu, which is outside of scope of our tutorial, you also can see this background color, for example, in the highlight of the hover or when we have a selected tab, as well as when we open a video. There is the area below the video where we have the description that is interactive, and it also uses this background color. So that's where I was coming from when it comes to the naming of the colors. But I think in a general bigger design system, we probably would have a separate button color as well. Now let's talk about components. So in general, components in Figma are used to keep consistency between different elements. So for example, if you were to use those buttons across multiple screens and multiple use cases, we would want to keep the styles consistent. That's why we would create a component and then use multiple instances of this component across the designs. So as a simple example, let's say that we have our button that will be a very bright blue button, let's say, that we have in our system. Let's create a component. We can either right click and say create component, or there is a shortcut for it as well. So right now you can see that the button is a component, this diamond shape with 4 squares, and the purple color indicates that in the layers panel. And if you were to look for this component in our assets panel under components, you can see there is a button available here. We can drag it to our frame. And when we come back to our layers panel, we can see the button, the main component, and then the instance of this button with this empty diamond shape next to the name. We can adjust our instance. So for example, here we can change text to all. And as you can see, it keeps the styles of the original button, it just resizes. If we were to, for example, change the background color of our source component button to more purple, the instance also changes. But on the other hand, if we're changing the instance color to, let's say, pink, our main component doesn't change. And of course, for every instance here, we have some options regarding the component. we can either go to main component. So if the component is on the other page or somewhere on the canvas, we can be moved to our main component. Or there are some additional options here that we can detach instance, so disconnect it from the component and edit it completely separately without any connection to main component. We can push changes to the main component, so it would make the main component pay. We can reset all changes or reset fill. So all the changes that we're making to our instance, we can potentially reverse them to the default state of a main component. So if you were to reset fill, it would come back to the purplish fill. Okay, we can delete this example and focus on our main buttons here right now. When it comes to those two buttons that we see here, we want to treat them as variants of the same component. So we don't want to create a separate component for the light button and separate component for the dark button, because this is just the same button in different state, active or default. And to do this, we need to create a button component with variants. So let's take a look on how to do it. First of all, let's work on the naming of our buttons, because both of them are named button right now. When we're creating variants of the same component, it's the easiest to just put / default and / active in their names. Now, to create components with variants, we can do it in two ways. The first way will be to componentize each of them. So create component for this one and create component for this one. Then we can select them. And in the right-hand side, in the right panel, we can see combine as variants. And that would be the first way. But let's now press Command Z a couple of times so that we are in the initial state. And I will show you a faster way to do it. Because let's imagine that you have, for example, 12 different variants that you want to componentize. You would need to go to every single one of them and create a component. That is not very time effective. So if we were to create a component with multiple variants as quickly as possible, we need to select all the variants, then go to this little menu at the top that says Components. And here we have a couple of options. We can create a component, so component out of those two elements, which is not what we want to do. Create multiple components, so all button would be one component and the podcast button would be the other component. And that's not what we want to do either. Or create a component set. It would mean that we have one component with variants. So we're getting into exactly the same result as at the beginning, although it's quicker than the other option. And as you've probably noticed, a couple of things have happened in the interface. The most important and the most visible one is this purple frame around two variants. This is how Figma marks that we have different variants within the same component. And if you were to drag additional components into it, it will also create additional variants. So this frame is very important. It's not just for visual purposes. And if we go to the layers panel, you can see that there is a button component. So the whole frame is a component. And within them, you have two subcomponents, two versions of active and default. So those are aligned with the names that we gave our buttons after the slash. And on the right-hand side, we have a new panel, Properties. And we can see the property 1 here with active and default. And we can rename this property into state, because it's the state of our button. And right now we have state, active, and default. And if we were to bring this button from our assets panel, you can see that this is an instance of the button component with the state active. And we can select default state and go to another style. And there's one more thing that I would like to mention. So if, for example, you would like to change the name of the variant, you can either do it here in the drop-down menu, just by editing the name, or if you double click in the layers panel, you can see state equals to default. So the state property equals default, and you can also change it here. Now let's leave our buttons for a moment and focus on the main design. First of all, we need to add a frame to our canvas to make sure that we are designing within the frame. And as you can see on the right, we have different options, and we would be interested in desktop and just a regular desktop. Let's rename our frame to YouTube homepage and make sure that we're using the background color. I think we can start with the top bar, and let's analyze what elements we have here. So first of all, we have the menu icon, then the logo, then our search bar and another icon, and then two other icons and avatar. So overall, we have a lot of focus on icons here, and I propose that we start with the icons. As you can see, one of the icons has the background here, but the other ones do not have background. And this is something interesting from the underlying, let's say, construction layer here. So if we were to go to the YouTube's homepage, which is live in our browser, and we hover over the icon, whichever icon it is, you can see that the background appears. So overall, we need to provide a container, the circular container for every single icon. It will just not be visible in the default state. So with that in mind, let's come back to Figma And let's source our icons. First of all, we need to get them from somewhere. We are not going to draw the icons. And for material design, for example, we have a library that is available via a plugin. The plugin is called Material Symbols. We need to change to Plugins and Material Symbols. And of course, it depends on the icon library that you would be using. You can use something that is available online for copying. Maybe you need to download the library. For some libraries, there are plugins available, like for this one. So let's take a look at what we need to search for. We definitely need notifications, and it would be just a simple bell. Let's change the color of it so that we can see it. It's not exactly the same, but I think we can go with this one. Then we have the video. Here it is. So we click and it appears on our canvas. Another icon would be the microphone icon and search icon. Microphone and search. An important thing here is that when you're working with this plugin, you need to deselect the icon that was just pasted, because if you were to have it selected, it will just change the icon. It wouldn't add it on top of the previous icon. And the last one will be the menu icon. Now we can close, change the color of all the icons to our icon color. And now let's build the container for every single of those icons. The size of the icon within the bounding box, so the box that constrains our icon with the frame around it, is 24 pixels, and it is a standard one for material design, so we will leave it as it is. When it comes to the bounding box, it's necessary for the icons because all the icons are slightly different. They take a little bit less or more of a vertical and horizontal space, and to space them evenly and to build components with them, we need a bounding box. So this blue frame that you can see here. And when it comes to building this container around the icon, we need to use auto layout. So we need to frame the selection again, create a frame. Let's call it icon. And then we need to apply auto layout so that we can add padding around the icon. And we need to think about it this way, that the circle needs to be 40 pixels. It's the standard for material design. And our icon is 24. So we can create a simple mathematical operation here in our padding box, which is 40 minus 24, and that gives us 16. But this is a sum of padding from right and left, so we need to divide it by 2. And you can perform those simple mathematical operations here directly in Figma. So now we have the padding around it, and as you can see, the width of our frame just changed to 40, and we need to do the same thing for height. So we need 8 pixels of padding because it's the same. And let's add a fill to it. Let's say that our secondary default fill for just a moment. Our frame is still rectangular. We need to add border radius. So let's say we go with something super high as 100 so that we have a circle. And our icon button is ready. We can change it to icon button. Of course, in a bigger design system, we would componentize this button with different states and componentize the icons within it and change them as we need. But in this very simple example, let's just keep it simple. Let's not create the components. So I want to copy this icon button 3 more times because we have 3 individual icons. The search icon is within another button. And I would like to cut one of the icons and paste it within our icon button and then remove the previous icon. And I'll do it for all the icon buttons. So we're keeping the same size, just copying and pasting. And overall, in our design, we have the icon button with background only for the microphone icon. The other icon buttons have no background, so we can remove background, but the frame still stays the same. So we have the size of the square of the 40 pixels, and it will be important for our spacing in the top bar. So let's place them more or less where they are in the top bar. This one will be in the center, the other one will be around here and around here. Let's not think about spacing yet because we will be doing that with auto layout. Let's just space them around for now. And now we need to create the search bar, and that will be a bigger task. The search bar seems like it's one big element, but in reality, it consists of 2 elements, the text input on the left and of the search button on the right. They just look like one element because of how the border radius is set up. Let's move forward with first creating the input field. So we would like some text that says search. We need the placeholder style, and we also need the placeholder color. It seems like it's different from the secondary text color that we've created. So let's create another text style for the placeholder color. And of course, let's name it again, placeholder. So text/placeholder, and it will be in our text area. Now let's create a frame around the text so that we can work with padding. And let's apply auto layout. When it comes to horizontal padding, let's apply 16 on each side. I think it's more or less what we see here. But when it comes to the vertical padding, I think we shouldn't apply it here based on the height of the text. Let's go with fixed height setting and set it up to 42 because this is the height of the text fields in material design. Now let's apply fill just by clicking in this area and apply the primary fill. We also need the border, so we go with stroke and apply our border color. When it comes to the search bar, we can see that here we have 100% border radius versus here we have no border radius. And to achieve this effect, we need to, instead of using just one corner radius value, click on this little button here that splits between all 4 values. This is the top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. So let's apply, let's say 100, like a huge value to top left and bottom left, so that we have this rounded corner, and leave 0 for the corners on the right. And for now, let's leave it alone, the short as it is, and let's focus on the button on the right. So let me bring the search icon, and let's do the same operations for our search button. So we need to create a frame, add auto layout, add padding of 16 on both sides, and then select the fixed height and enter 42 as a value here. We also need to change the setting of the alignment because right now we are aligning things to top left corner. We need to align to the center, so the icon is right now in the center. Again, we're applying the fill. So we have the secondary fill and stroke analogically to what we have before. So border color. And now we need to apply the border radius just for different corners. So for the corners on the right now. And now this button is sort of similar. We can see that maybe the button on the original design is slightly bigger. So let's try to increase padding to, let's say, 20. It seems now that it's more aligned with what we had there. Right now we have 2 elements, the input field and the button. And let's put them together in one frame. We need to again apply auto layout so that we are able to influence how the elements behave within the frame. The frame should have fixed width of 600 pixels. This is how wide the whole search element is. And we need to apply a slightly different type of auto layout. So instead of defining how much space is between the elements, we need to distribute those elements from one corner to the other. So we click on auto, and now you can see that the element on the right is far on the right, and the element on the left is far on the left, and that's how they're going to stay. The only missing element is that this search input is too short. So let's click on it. And in settings here, instead of hugging the elements, so hugging the text and adding the padding, let's select fill container. So it will fill the space up to the search icon element on the right. And now the only thing that is missing here is the alignment. So instead of having it centrally aligned, let's align to the left. And more or less, we are ready with our search bar. Let's move it to our target wireframe and move it in the center area here. So our top bar is sort of coming together. Let's work with those 2 elements, so the search bar and the microphone icon button. Let's select 2 of them, create a frame, so again, frame selection, add auto layout, and make sure that they are spaced 16 pixels apart. And we also want to align them to the center. I also wanted to align it to our YouTube homepage frame, but I've noticed that the icons at the top are not active, and it indicates that our frame 3 right now, so the search group, is not within the YouTube homepage. So you can see in the layers panel, here we have the YouTube homepage, and here we have our search group. And matter of fact, all of the icons that we've created so far are also not within the YouTube homepage frame. So let's drag and select all of them. You can see that also YouTube homepage frame was selected. So we hold Shift and click on the YouTube homepage to deselect it so that the selection is only here. We need to cut those, so use Command X, click on our frame, and then paste Command V so that we have those elements within our frame. And if we click on Align to Center, it will align to the frame. So if the element is within the frame, it will align to the frame, to the parent frame. So it's looking better and better. We have 2 elements that are missing, the avatar and our YouTube logo. And let's focus on the avatar now. So we need to think about the avatar as a photo that was cropped to a shape of a circle. Let's draw an ellipse, let's say 40 pixels height and width. Right now, this element has a default fill, but we can choose any photo that we want if we have something on our drive. But in this case, I don't have anything that is worth adding here. So I would like to show you the Content Reel plugin that I use all the time. So you go to Plugins here and select Content Reel. You run the plugin, and basically this plugin allows you to add content to your designs. It can be a text content, image, icon, etc. So basically, if you need some example content for your designs, this is a really good place to go. As you can see, we can select some avatars, full name, date, full address, phone number, etc. So you don't have to just come up with all those ideas. So let's go to images and let's go with general avatars. And we have a couple to select from. We also have avatars female or avatars male. So there are many photos to choose from. Let's go with those avatars and let's select this first one. Now, just to make sure that we are on the same page, let's compare the sizes here. And we can see that the avatar that we've created is slightly too big. So let's make it smaller and it will be 34 pixels. So let's change the avatar size to 34. So we have the avatar, the icons. We're missing only the logo. Let's go to our assets page. I've already downloaded the YouTube logo from their assets. I'll add the link to the website where there's full press kit of YouTube. So let's copy this logo and let's paste it in our design. And let's change the height to 20 and the width will be changed proportionally. And we need to take one more step. So create the top bar and distribute all of the elements that we have here. So when you look at the top bar, we can see three groups. The first group here, the second one here, and the third one on the right. And let's try to replicate that. So let's select the icon here and the YouTube logo. Try to frame it, frame selection, apply auto layout, and space them 16 pixels apart. And let's do the same thing for the icons and avatar on the right. So icons, I think they should be spaced 8 pixels apart. So we need to frame them separately, apply auto layout, and add 8 pixels. And then the icons and the avatar should be in a separate frame so that we can space them slightly differently, so 16 pixels apart. So as you can see here, the space between icons is slightly different, and I needed to achieve this effect by adding frame within a frame. And now we have all those three frames. Let's select all of them and frame them together in a frame named top bar. And we want our top bar to also have auto layout applied and space elements equally. So we need to select the auto spacing. So the search bar will be in the center and the groups will be on the right and on the left, and the spacing between them will be exactly the same. We want it to have fixed height of 56 pixels. We need to align elements in the top bar to the center, and we need to align it to the top of the frame and let's say to the left so that we can stretch it for it to be full width. And the only thing that is missing are margins, because right now the elements are touching the borders and it shouldn't be like this. So let's add the left and right margin. And maybe you can tell here that the right margin in the original screenshot is slightly bigger than the left margin because this one is aligned more with the icons. So the value on the left should be 16 and on the right should be 24. And to apply it, we need to expand this panel a little bit so that we can control each margin separately and add 16 to the left margin and 24 to the right margin. And we're done. We have our top bar ready to go. Now let's focus on the left navigation. So as you can see here, we have a couple of icons. I've already prepared them, so we don't waste time here on looking for icons. I used our material symbols plugin. As you can see here, they are slightly different to what's on the website. I think that the YouTube's website uses the old Material Design icons library, and those are the new ones because Material Design released a new version recently. Well, not that recently, but maybe they haven't updated it yet. So let's think about the structure here. Basically, we have icons with page titles, and they are spaced between each other so that they create this vertical navigation bar. So let's add a text to the first one, home, and it will be our navigation link text. And let's put it in a frame together with an icon. Let's add auto layout, center from the top, and let's make the spacing between them 8. It seems like a little much. Maybe let's lower it to 6 or even 4. That seems a little bit closer. And now we can rename this frame, navigation link. And now we can copy this frame and apply different icons and names. And how I copy in Figma is usually that I select the item that I want to copy. I start to drag it and I press Option. And I release my mouse before I release the Option key. And this way, it will just copy the same element. Let me show you one more thing before I speed this up for you. When it comes to adding the icon to our frame, I'll cut it, I'll select the frame, and I paste it. So Command V. And as you can see, it pastes the icon at the bottom of the frame. And with auto layout, we can change the order of items. So if I were to select this icon and press arrow up, it will move this icon one position to the top. And if I do it again, it moves up again. So I would like to remove the home icon and just stay with this one. All the tabs are ready now. Let's select all of them, cut them from here, and paste them into our destination frame. We need to, of course, change the color of our icons and our text. So we can see that icons are slightly lighter. Let's change this one to icon and text color to text primary. Now we're ready to start aligning those icons. So let's create a frame and apply auto layout to it. It should be aligned to the top and center, and we should add 32 pixels between the tabs. Now to finish our bar, we would like it to have a fixed width of 64 pixels and be aligned to the left. I also would like to add padding, top and bottom padding of 24 pixels. And let's move it closer to the top bar, and you can see that those elements are touching now by this red indicator. On the second look, it seems like the space between the icon and the text is slightly bigger. So let's select all of the elements that we have in our frame, and it's a good opportunity to show you how to do it from the Layers panel. Let's rename it to Left Navbar, and if we were to open this frame, we can see all the links. So if you want to select everything from the frame, you can select the first item, hold Shift, and select the last item, and it will select all of the frames that are inside of the bigger frame. And now we can change the setting for all of the items. Let's increase it to 6 pixels. Of course, to do it even more effectively, we could have created a component out of every navigation link, and then if we were to change one of them, all of them would change. Moving on now to filter buttons that we worked on initially at the beginning of this video. So we have around 11 buttons here in the row, and they are spaced evenly. So we need to put all of them in a frame and use auto layout to space them out. Let's bring our button component from the assets panel. Let's drag it into the frame. And by default, we have a button with an active state, and that's fine for our use case. Now let's hold Shift and Option to drag and copy it. And let's change it to default. And it's ready with the title. And I will create the rest of the buttons. I will speed it up for you. Amazing, we have all the buttons ready, and now we can select all of them and put them in a frame. Let's rename our frame to Filters, and let's apply auto layout so that we can space the buttons. It seems like they are around 12 pixels apart. And since there is some margin here on the left between the left navbar and the filters and the videos as well, let's apply padding of 32 pixels. And now let's move our filters to our YouTube homepage frame. And let's move it all the way to the top bar until we see the red line, and also all the way to the left until we see the red line vertically. We have a little bit of a mistake here. Let's align them well. So if you would like to see if elements are touching, for sure, you can select one of the elements and hover over the other one, and then you will be able to tell that they are actually touching and not overlapping as they used to a second ago. I think we also need to add a little bit of vertical padding between those two elements here, so that filters are not basically on our top bar. Let's add top padding 16 and bottom 32. We're done with the filters. Now it's time to move on to the most exciting part of this video, creating the video grid. And the first step would be here to analyze how the video grid is constructed. We need one big frame for all the videos and then one frame per row to space them out vertically and horizontally. Within that, each video would be its own frame where we would use even more frames to space things out. I think we should start with a thumbnail and the video duration indicator. Let's move on to our YouTube homepage frame and draw a rectangle. The rectangle should be 315 and 177, and it should have border radius of 12. By default, it has a solid color applied, but we need some kind of picture. So let's use the Unsplash plugin to look for some examples. You can use this plugin for your mockups when you need some pictures, and they have some editorial pictures, but also some presets where you can insert a random picture or choose from categories. I think we should use Abstract for this because we don't have any specific topics for our videos. Let's see what it generated. This one is a little bit boring, so let's try again. This one works very well. Let's close the plugin, and now let's focus on the video duration part. I'll start with typing the text. Let's say it's 12 minutes 38 seconds, and it will be 12 and Roboto semi-bold. We don't have this text style yet in our library, so I'll create one. I'll name it video duration and create style. Let's frame the selection so that we can create the background, and let's use auto layout. I think we should add around 2 pixels top bottom and let's say 6 pixels left and right. Let's move it on top of our thumbnail so we can see the shape a little bit better. Let's use background primary, detach it, and change the opacity to like 90. And I think we also need border radius of 4. From here, we need to select those two elements, create another frame, and define the placement of this duration element. To do this, we need to apply auto layout, and since the video duration element was already on top of our thumbnail, Figma is smart enough to automatically apply the absolute position. When an element has an absolute position applied, it means that it's being taken out of the context of the whole frame with auto layout, and you can position it freely, however you want, within the context of a frame. So if you were to turn off the absolute position, you can see that now we have those two elements spaced vertically, as per rules applied to the auto layout for the whole frame. If you wanted to just move this element around and position it freely within the frame with auto layout, it's impossible. We need to turn on the absolute position, and right now we can basically move it around. I would like to select this element, go to the right and bottom corner so that we're starting with 0 pixels distance, and now go with 8 pixels margin from the right and 8 pixels margin from the bottom. To move an element quicker towards a desired direction, you can hold Shift and press an arrow, so it gives you 10 pixels, and then I go 1, 2, clicked on arrow down, so I have 8 pixels of distance. The next step is to draw the avatar. We need to take the ellipse tool, draw it, holding Shift, so it keeps the proportions, and go with 36. Here we also need an example avatar picture, so we're going to go for the Content Reel plugin, choose Image, and go with avatars and choose the first avatar. This is how it looks like. Now let's put together the texts. So first would be the title. We need to change the text style to title and the text color to primary. And of course, we'll not be coming up with the titles for all the videos that we want to show in our design. So again, let's go to Content Reel plugin. Let's go to text and search for title. We have some article titles. I think we can reuse those. Let's close the plugin and zoom out a little bit. The text is slightly too big, so I'm going to just resize it. Let's not worry about the perfect size right now. We will do it with auto layout later on. Another text that we need is the name of the channel, and we will go with the subtitle and also text secondary, default. Again, we will not be coming up with names, so let's go with Content Reel and let's go with full names and just select one. And the last line would be the number of views and when the video was published. Between those two elements in this line, there is a separator in the form of a little dot. Let's draw an ellipse that would be 6 pixels height and width. Change the color to also text secondary so it aligns with our text. And let's group those three elements together in a frame. Now we need to apply the auto layout to space them out evenly. And let's go with maybe 6 or 8 just to space them out. I've decided to use auto layout here because if you were to edit the value, so for example, let's change it to 1 million views, then the whole frame will resize, so you don't have to make any manual adjustments. And now it's time to create all the frames that we talked about earlier so that we can space elements evenly. Let's select all the texts, put them in a frame, and apply auto layout. This part of the interface is quite dense, so let's apply just 0 pixels, and let's group it with the avatar. So frame selection. Here also let's apply auto layout and set the gap to 12. And as you can see here, we have a little bit of space on the right left. We will fix that in a moment. To do it, we need to select both this frame and the thumbnail. Let's hold Shift and click on the thumbnail to select both elements. Frame them again. Let's name it video. And let's apply auto layout as well. This time it will be vertical and also 12 pixels. And the last thing to fix is this space here. To fix it, we need to change how the width of certain frames is being defined. So when we click on the video, it shouldn't be hanging contents. It should be fixed width. It will be adjusted to the thumbnail that we have here. It's a set element that we need to align all the elements to. Then when we click on the frame that is within it with text and avatar, instead of being fixed, so just a defined 278 width, we need to make it fill container. So it will be filling out this container. But as you can see, the text still is not filling out the container here. We need to go one level deeper and also set fill container here. And for both video and the name, also select fill container. And right now, if we were to add some characters to title line or this second line, it will just fill out the container. When it comes to this last line, we also can do it. So fill container. At the same time, each of those elements here should remain with hug. We shouldn't fill the container because otherwise I can show you what will happen. So if we were to fill container, it will just divide the whole thing in half. And this is not what we want to do. And this is the whole work that we needed to do for the video container. Now we will be moving on to creating the grid. To create the grid and make the mockup look believable, I need to duplicate this container that we have here with the video and change the content of it, because we wouldn't like to just repeat it. It would look a little bit odd when someone is reviewing the mockup, so we need to change the contents as well. And I will speed this up for you. I have my videos and avatars ready, and now I will go through titles and the names. And the last thing to do to add variety to this mockup is to work on the last row, so I will put together some random numbers for the views and for the timeline. And now that we're done with creating content, let's focus on spacing it out. So let's go row by row. Let's select all of the videos, frame selection, apply auto layout, and space them 16 pixels apart. And let's do the same thing for the second row, frame selection, auto layout, 16, and the third row as well. Frame selection, auto layout, 16. You may have probably noticed that the spacing here is a little bit off. We need to, instead of center it, go to the align top left. And now we have all the rows ready. Let's group them together in another frame. Add auto layout, this time vertical, and go with 32 pixels. We are almost here. We need to add some padding to the left and right, and let's add analogical padding that we did for the filters row, which is 32. So let's go with 32 left and right, and let's align it with the row here. They are already touching each other, and we added some padding to the filters row, so there is no need to add padding here to the videos. And as you can see here, the content of this frame is partially cut off because on the YouTube homepage frame, we have the clip content selected. If we were to deselect it, the text would overflow the frame. But what we want to do is, of course, keep it selected. And that's it. Our design is ready to go. We've created the whole YouTube page homepage and learned a lot about auto layout. Thank you so much for joining me today. Remember to subscribe to my channel and like this video. And if you have any ideas about the future Figma tutorials that you would like to see, please let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.